Here's I'm on mute. How is everybody today? So we got 3 other people. That's awesome. Bunch of stuff open. Give me 1 second. I think that's probably ton of stuff open. It's fine. Chloe, how are you doing? I am supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. That's how I'm doing. Spent like 2 hours trying to get this ready, and I made like 3 mistakes already, but it's fine. So I don't know why Dr. Moore's Zoom is not working. That was the one that she told me to use, so it might just be like a glitch or something, but hopefully Dr. Moore joins us here. Let's see, I don't think she's here yet. No. So just hang tight for a second here. Hopefully she'll show up. But yeah, while we're waiting, does anyone want to have anything to like share? Because I'm sure some of you have some exciting stuff right now. Anything interesting?
I actually don't. I'm just here just to learn.
Eric, that's such a mood. Oh, awesome. Awesome. You got a job, Chloe. That is awesome. I am so looking forward to my summer. I do not want to work at all. So good. Are you in Pittsburgh, Eric, or are you back in Morgantown?
I'm in the Motown.
The Motown. Sweet. I am actually in North Carolina right now. I had a last minute trip come up, so it's nice because I'm actually right on the beach. I'm in the Outer Banks, so it's like.
And shit, why are you doing forensic science right now?
It's fun. It's interesting, but I want to just walk to the beach right now because I am so exhausted. I have an exam tomorrow in political science, so that's.
I have an exam as well. I feel that though.
Yeah. But
it's in finance, but like it shouldn't be too bad.
Yeah, your finance exams are interesting, to be honest.
They're more like they used to be math related, but now they're just like using math. Like they'll just give you like a paragraph, and like you kind of just have to like from the paragraph like create a math equation, and then like from there like explain like your reasoning for like the paragraph. You know what I mean? It's like kind of weird, but it's not like hard.
It sounds a little bit hard, to be honest.
I like honestly, I didn't even know there was math shit in this like forensic science stuff, but like I bet I'll be able to figure it out like in no time. But like everything else, fucking forget about it. I don't know shit.
Eric, you are such a mood. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Like I'll be sitting there talking to my friends about like forensic science shit, and they're like, dude, you know so much about this stuff. And I'm like, no, I don't. No, I don't.
Dude, I love it. Dr. Moore is not here. So what oh wait, actually, no. Dr. Moore is not here. So I do, oh, Dr. Moore is here. Yes. Oh, thank goodness. I am not good at explaining.
Yes. Yeah, sorry. I was trying to get the old link to work, and it was not going to be functional.
Gotcha. Yeah, it was telling me it was like something wrong with the link, and I was like, oh no, I hope I'm not doing anything wrong here.
No, it was me. It was me. I will have to change that link if we want to do this again. But I'm glad that you were able to host.
Good.
So what is the issue?
The issue. The issue is the exams are exhausting, and my brain is not meant for that. But I am going to try to go over a couple of things. that I had questions about. And of course, if anybody else has questions about, I would love to you can ask Dr. Moore here because she is a professional. She knows the stuff. So.
Almost as if I'm the one teaching the class.
I had last minute today, I had a fun example. So let me go.
Get out of
Sorry, my brain is very weird how it's set up. So, oh, that is just adorable. I wish I had my cat with me. But I'm glad you all are here today because it makes it easier on me when there's like a whole bunch of people, because that way we can kind of bounce ideas around. So if you can probably do pretty well in the last, or if you think you're going to do well in the last exam without studying, it would almost be like saying I can get a hole-in-one here from where I'm sitting. You might be able to, but you might not be able to if you're like me. So let's start practicing now, 3 weeks in advance, that way, or just about 3 weeks in advance. That way we can do wellness exam together. So I have a couple of notes here. I wanted to just quickly go over the, let me put my slides here. I bet this is gonna be nice and easy. Oh yes, let me present this. All right, so first of all, thank you, Dr. Moore, for being here. I really do appreciate it. And of course, I have to start out with a pun, but I was going to go over the types of evidence because I feel like these are easy, but they're just really easy to mess up because they're like old, boring words. So I was just going to quickly run over these. And Dr. Moore, if I'm saying something wrong, please interrupt me because I would hate to teach something wrong. So prima facie. So prima facie would be based on the first impression, accepted as correct until proven otherwise. So it's actually a really interesting way to remember this. I found this picture of a speed limit sign in, where did I say that? I think it's Georgia, no, Michigan. And it says speed limit 25, prima facie. Does anybody have any idea, what would you do if you saw that when you're driving? What does that mean? Anybody? Hopefully I didn't lock up here. I think my computer actually, I think it should be all right.
No, you're good.
Okay, my computer. Anyway, I actually kind of don't know myself, but I would say it probably means 25 miles per hour unless said otherwise. I think that's what I saw online. So basically, if somewhere else it says 15 miles an hour, that's the speed you should be going. So this is 25 unless it says otherwise. And I love this example I wrote down here below. You come home from college and find Max eating cake. Your first conclusion might be that he stole it, which is prima facie, but you might discover that your family started him on a new diet, which is pretty much my dog. But I think that's a good example of prima facie and a very important one, like important thing to remember because it's something that comes up a lot, actually. I'm a political science major and I see it a lot. So prima facie is first impression. Oops, I cannot use this thing today.
So a good example of prima facie evidence from our sort of most recent module is, let's say that we were doing, so it's question documents week. So if you have a document and you find two different colors of black ink on it, or two different black ink from two different pens, that would be prima facie evidence that your document had been altered. Like, you're going to believe if we have two different inks on there, unless we have substantial alternative explanations, that's what you believe. Like it's right up there. Similarly, if we find methamphetamine residues in a urine sample using an immunoassay, that's prima facie evidence that you were smoking meth. Now, is it possible that you were actually consuming a prescription medication? Yes, it is. But on the face of it, we're going to believe that you were doing whatever you're kind of accused of doing, or what we think will solve the case.
See, that's a good example.
If you find cat hair on your sweater, that's prima facie evidence that the cat was sleeping on your sweater.
I see.
Particularly if you don't own a cat.
That's true. That is a good example, and that is definitely related to the modules that I've been It's a good example. The next one that I have here is is it circumstantial? I didn't realize this. I don't know if I can move this on. Yeah, that's circumstantial. So could have arisen for non-criminal reasons. So a great example would be a set of fingerprints found at a crime scene. If the fingerprints belong to a former bank robber and the crime was a bank robbery, you might just assume that he is the bank robber. However, his prints could have been on the counter from an innocent deposit. I think that's probably one of your likely examples is fingerprints, right? That I would say that's probably one of your most likely.
Yes, your particular example would sort of stride the line between prima facie and circumstantial, and there's not like a hard line that says one is the other. Like the prima facie is sort of on the far end of, yeah, you did this and there's no really alternative, to, well, it could have been you or it could have been one of 6 zillion other people.
I see. Okay. Sorry, my brain has to catch up a little bit. I'm all right, that's good. And then
So a potential circumstantial evidence, if we go with let's go with drugs. Let's say that you have cannabis residues on something you own. Well, maybe you were smoking weed, or maybe you have a roommate or other person who lives with you or around you who smokes weed. In the case of our altered check, there could be completely legitimate reasons to have 2 colors of ink on there. And so, a good lawyer will argue one way or the other. But in any time we're dealing with class level evidence, it's circumstantial. So like hairs and fibers are almost always circumstantial because we can't individualize them very easily.
I see. So those are pretty similar. I think I actually got this mixed up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I see. And so for that would be more for exclusion. You can use that.
Yeah.
I see. That makes sense. And then corroborating, I think this one should be pretty straightforward. That's just like 2 types of evidence that come together, or a few types, to kind of prove something. Putting pieces together. Yes. So corroborating evidence would be like fingerprints are found, you don't have an alibi, and your shoe prints are also found. That would be corroborating evidence.
Correct. It would be 2 pieces of evidence that tell the same story. For example, your case, there are fingerprints and shoe marks. They both seem to support the hypothesis that you are our culprit. If we find, so in your earlier example of the dog that was eating the cake, if we have, the vet bill and we have the dog who's eating weird information, those 2 pieces of evidence corroborate our theory that the dog is on a new diet.
I see. And then I guess the opposite would be conflicting. I don't know if it's the exact opposite, but definitely related. So that would be like if the suspect had an alibi, or if the person who actually committed the crime was caught and confessed, or even if I believe that a mistake was made, like if the fingerprint was later found to be misidentified. Examples.
That's one way to do it. Another way is anytime you have 2 pieces of evidence that don't tell the same story. So maybe we find your fingerprints, so whoever you are, in your own home, and you are, say, the victim of some sort of, let's go with a robbery. It could be that there was no robbery and you're telling a lie, but showing that you were, have credit card receipts or a telephone GPS history that shows that you were in another place when your home was robbed conflicts with our hypothesis that you're lying to the cops. So in the case of your alibi, that is a classic conflicting evidence. Now it's a statement of what you were doing, but particularly if you can support that alibi with evidence of your own, that tends to show that the hypothesis was incorrect. It is not a bad thing to have conflicting evidence, because it tells us that our ideas are incorrect, and we want to know that our ideas are incorrect before it goes to court. So if you find person A's fingerprints and person B's semen at a sexual assault, well, that tends to show that, okay, person A maybe did this, but it's more likely that it's person B.
I see. So it could still, the evidence that you have could still prove that that person committed the crime, but maybe not in the way that you're telling that story.
Yes, because these each pair of terms is separate and independent from the next pair.
I see. And then I think these are the last two. And these I think were pretty, I don't want to say easy, because they're easy to mess up as well. But exculpatory would show innocence of a suspect, whereas incriminating shows guilt of a suspect. But would a confession be considered incriminating?
Yes.
So if
Yes.
I was figuring that's probably your top, like, number one, but a confession doesn't necessarily mean they committed the crime. They could have confessed to a crime that they did not commit.
Okay, so a good example here. So since he's in my lap, here we have Max. Let's say I find some cat hair on my clothes and I'm like, damn it, Max, you've been sleeping on my cat hair again. So the fact that we have cat hair is incriminating evidence for Max here. My theory is that Max is my guilty party. So cat hair is incriminating. But if I take a closer look, I find that the hair in question is actually gray, and Max is not a gray cat. So that conflicts with my story, with my hypothesis, and is the fact that the cat hair is gray is exculpatory for Max. It would be incriminating and corroborating my theory if I had instead a gray cat.
Good. That's really good. And I think that is, the end of my slides. So that's what I had, my slides. But I do have a couple other questions. And of course, if anybody else wants to jump out and ask any questions, I would definitely appreciate that. I think one of the parts that tripped me up, at least that comes to my mind, is the blood. It's fun stuff, but a lot of different aspects. So surface tension, that's related to the viscosity, right? So as opposed to like water.
Not at all.
Really?
Not at all.
Well, I'm glad I asked.
It's all right. It's all right. So surface tension is a basic property of a liquid. Almost all liquids, all liquids have surface tension, and it is unrelated to their viscosity, which is a completely separate physical property. It's like mass and dimension. Like you can have really heavy things that are short, or the same thing that is the same weight that's really long. They're independent physical properties. Surface tension is the tendency or the strength of the attraction between molecules within our liquid. So some liquids, they want to hang on to each other really tightly. Others, not so much. Things with and that is our surface tension, because what it means is that the molecules that are on the outside layer of our liquid hang on to each other and don't allow little bits of the liquid to break away. So surface tension, when it comes to blood, is going to govern the shape and size of our impact and cast-off spatter. That's why it forms circles, ovals, etc. as it impacts. Viscosity is the thickness and resistance to flow. Viscosity is going to affect the volume of blood in, say, pools, how far down walls a flow pattern will go, things of this nature. So viscosity is not super important to blood stain pattern when we compare it to surface tension. Mostly what viscosity does is if a material is too viscous, surface tension will have a hard time pulling it into a sphere. So we get weird shapes on the outcome. In the case of blood, the viscosity, it's slightly higher than water, but it's not so much the surface tension can't make it behave like a nearly ideal form.
I see. See, that definitely clears that up a lot.
So things with low surface tension, when you drop them or fling them, they spread out like crazy pants. Things with high surface tension don't expand very much at all. And so since we use things like the degree of spread to estimate height from the drop, how high from a surface something has been dropped, or how much kinetic energy has been put into it, that's why surface tension is important for blood.
Awesome. And identifying the blood where it belongs. So from human blood to other animals. I think ferrets and like monkeys, it could be confused, right?
It depends on your test. So if you are using the immunoassay that comes on the chip, the little OBT1, that particular set of antibodies cannot distinguish between human, ferret, chimp, gorilla, and other animals. So for whatever reason, that particular, as long as you can eliminate ferrets as your killer or source of blood, I should say, you're safe to practice there. That's a good example of prima facie evidence. We would accept the outcome. Yeah, this is human. Well, it turns out that thanks to contrite fallibility, that somehow there was an escaped orangutan that got into a fight, and that was actually the source of our blood. Is it unusual? Would we tend to accept it on the front as a working theory? No, it's a very unusual thing that really has to be supported. But anyway, so the OBT1 makes that particular confusion. Not all immunoassays do. So for example, if you're using the Auchterlonie double diffusion test and you put human antibodies in your Auchterlonie, it tends to be more specific. And so you will not have a false positive with human or with the chimp there. But very few places do the Auchterlonie. And the reason why most places don't do the Auchterlonie, the OBT1 is really cheap. And if it's not human blood, when you go to put it through DNA, it won't amplify because they don't have the same STRs that humans do. So PCR won't work, and you're like, well, turns out it wasn't human. And that's a lot faster than trying to run Auchterlonie and then try and do DNA. Used to be when you had to do the more complicated gel DNA that you would really make sure that you were dealing with human before you went to DNA. But our instruments are fast enough now that nobody really bothers.
See.
Excuse me.
So on the slides, I saw motion splatter and cast off. Are they the same thing?
Cast off is a form of motion splatter.
Let's see. That makes sense. Are there other examples of like motion splatter?
Impact and all of our projected stains. Basically, if your blood is being flung in some way, squirted in some way, or smacked in, so if kinetic energy is being applied to the blood, it's got one of those motion. It's a motion splatter.
And then pressure projection. So I saw the example of like the little ketchup packets getting squished. Is that pretty much just like getting crushed and like maybe ran over by a car?
Honestly, the most frequent I have seen it, and I say seen it because I was the one who accidentally did it, is when a blood stain that's still semi-wet gets stepped on.
Oh, that's a good example.
So you'll have like drop patterns. So someone is bleeding and the blood has fallen, or even if it's cast off, you have a quantity of blood on the floor and somebody steps on it. Liquids are incompressible, right? So they have to go somewhere. So under the pressure of your foot, they go and squirt outwards.
I see.
The other common projected stain is when you sneeze or blow it. You're providing energy here when you're trying to clear your airways.
I see. I was actually just about to ask. So for expirated blood, I know it's often you cough or sneeze it, but I saw it also says it can come out of a wound. What would
Yep.
be mindful of that?
So if you hit so arterial spurt is an example of projected blood. If you hit a blood vessel that is under pressure and it squirts, then you can get a projected stain that way. These are not common because it turns out that your bodies, you have evolved to protect your arteries. So the femoral artery, the carotid, and I having a mental blank on the one that runs down your arms. These are deep tissue. So you almost have to cut somebody's head off really deep or get really lucky with a stab wound to hit the carotid. Hitting a vein, the venous pressure is not quite as high as it is in the arterial side. If you hit a big one like maybe the jugular, you can get some good squirt on that one, but it's less powerful than hitting an artery. But you have to hit a big blood vessel. So when you watch horror movies and somebody like hits, or comedies where somebody takes off a finger with a saw blade and it's like blasting blood everywhere, really doesn't work. It doesn't quite work that way.
I see.
But if you do decapitate someone, you can get up to 35 feet of squirt from the carotid. I do not know how that data was collected.
I was gonna say that's helpful to keep in mind. I'll keep in mind. So if you were to cut off your arm, though, that would probably create a huge, or I guess like from the hand, would that create a squirt?
So the wrist is pretty small. I mean, by the time, you can even see you might get a little bit, but you'd have to open. Because also remember that when you cut a tube that's filled with liquid, it tends to collapse in on itself. So it's unlikely that you're going to get a lot of strong squirting. You can get some, but it's not like Sam Raimi, Army of the Dead. Everybody's filled with 60 gallons of blood at 500 psi. Not quite that high.
Like in the 35 feet example, I'm going to take that as a note. I'm sure that's not going to be on the exam, but I just feel like I need to know that. So 35 feet. Okay. Oh, void patterns. So could that be a result of like a picture coming off the wall, or is it just like?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that blocks blood that is being projected would cause a void pattern behind it.
I see.
So I have all this crap on my wall. If somebody was killed in my bedroom and then I removed a picture off the wall, the blood would stay on the picture and there'd be a blank spot behind. The most common reason that we care about void patterns is they either tell us that somebody has been moved, or they tell us where the perpetrator was standing. Because if you're beating on somebody, your body will block the back spatter, and so it can it can help assist in determining where the event took place, and particularly where the perpetrator was standing.
I see. All right. For hair analysis, I know we can use that to exclude, but if the case is a bit older, could the person's hair change over time to where you could not exclude it? Yes.
Hair evidence is much like how bite mark analysis is now considered bullshit. I don't say that in the online class, but I say it in the face-to-face class. Bite mark analysis is bullshit. Most hair analysis is bullshit too. Simply because there is so much intra-person variation. So the hair on your head and over time changes, that trying to compare it and make a identification and sometimes even an exclusion call is hard and sometimes a little bit dubious. At best, it's like, well, we can say, well, it's definitely not cat hair, or it's definitely not human hair, or this highly curly dark hair probably didn't come from our blonde victim. And that seems like it's those level of analysis wouldn't be useful, but it is. Even if we're just saying, We found a dark curly hair on our victim who is, blonde, and our suspect also has dark curly hair. Circumstantial evidence, because it turns out there's lots of people with dark curly hair. It is incriminating, and it supports our hypothesis that this is our suspect. We would definitely want other corroborating evidence before going to trial that, he, for example, yes, that not only was it a dark curly hair, but it also had his DNA. That would be what we would want.
That's good. And then this one's a little bit more broad, but the microscopes. I am not good at remembering microscopes. So for light microscope, polarizing, and SEM, can you go over those a little bit?
All right, so the easiest one is actually the polarizing light microscope. We mostly use the PLM, not to make things bigger so we can see them, but to measure physical properties such as anisotropy, isotropy, birefringence, etc. Mainly what we do with this is drug identification and trace evidence identification, because things like your birefringence, refractive analysis, isotropy, anisotropy, etc., are basic physical characteristics of different chemicals. So you don't have to have a wet chemistry lab in order to determine that cocaine is cocaine. You look at the refraction of the crystal under a polarizing light microscope. Many PLMs also function as regular old light microscopes, and the goal of a light microscope is just to make something tiny bigger, up to about 40 or 80 times bigger than it is in life. So we'd use that for any sort of little small evidence. And then, of course, a comparison microscope is you just stick two of them together and look at them both at the same time. They're almost always plain PLAIN, like simple light microscopes that have been stuck together. And then the scanning electron microscope we use for looking at really, really tiny stuff. So like the cross sections of hairs, even blowing that up 80 times, it's still going to be a teensy little piece of thing that you're trying to look at. So the cross sections of hairs, many of our so if you own a microfiber sheets, like they're very popular because they're soft and comfy, looking at those under a regular old light microscope, you're not going to get a lot of detail because these fibers, which are artificial, are so tiny. But if we put them under the scanning electron microscope, you can actually see the fibers and look at the cross sections as well, and get them big enough to extract information. The other thing we do with the SEM is if you also add in a X-ray, so SEM doesn't use light, it uses a beam of electrons. If you also measure the X-ray that is refracted off of your sample when that happens, you can identify the chemical elements that are present in your sample. So we use that with gunshot residue to find the presence of lead, barium, and antimony, which are a characteristic trio for that.
See, that was actually my next question. You already answered it. Perfect. Perfect. EDX. Okay, so could that be used to confirm that the three elements are like gunshot residues?
So you could also do this using something like pyrolysis chromatography or atomic inference. There's other chemical techniques that I believe your book talks about, but I didn't talk about in lecture. So the reason we do it with the SEM is because we get a picture of the fact that we've got to have a single blob of material, and the excitation spectrum tells us is associated with each particular element. So we get a picture and we get confirmation of the stuff that's in the picture at the same time. It's pretty quick to do, and is a very believable, scientifically sound piece of evidence and identification that again doesn't require a chemistry wet lab. Just a giant tank of liquid nitrogen.
All right, I am down to my last two questions. So I'm going to quickly throw it out. If anyone wants to throw anything in the chat, I'm just finishing up here. So I would love to hear your questions because I'm asking a ton of questions. So
yeah, also if you have questions about this week, if there is something that you're struggling with or want to ask about before you turn in your quizzes?
Ooh, that's a good
We can do
opportunity
that.
there.
I won't tell you the answer, but I can possibly point you at the right direction.
All right, I'll try to grab one question from this week's modules. I think I did have one, but let me just quickly go over the spectrophotometer. So this is actually, I think I was talking to you about spelling bees last time. This is the word, or just about the word that I spelled wrong at my regional B that I was getting the nationals because I forgot the R. So what is the spectrophotometer? Is that similar to the EDX?
Sort of, in the sense that they are both measuring how much of something is reflected. In the case of the EDX, it's measuring the energy at which a X-ray is reflected. The spectrophotometer is measuring how much light is being reflected at each individual wavelength. So the spectrophotometer bounces a laser, basically, of a particular wavelength at the sample, measures how much of that light is absorbed by the sample and how much is reflected back. Absorbance and transmission, or reflection. It then moves on to the next wavelength up the chain, shines your light on it, measures how much of that is reflected and absorbs, all the way up from the longest to the shortest to longest wavelength. It then generates a graph which shows how much at each along the x-axis here is your wavelength, how much, and then your y-axis is absorbance. And I say absorbance or reflection because it's like 1 minus absorbance equals reflection. You know, if you have one, you have the other. It's different instruments, and it depends on what you're trying to measure. You'll do either one, but because that really doesn't matter. We'll generate a graph of how much light is reflected at each wavelength. The light that is reflected is a physical property of the thing you're looking at, or of the color of the thing you're looking at. So if we're looking at in the visible light spectrum, so between about 490 and about 900 nanometers of light, what you're measuring when you shine a spectrophotometer on something is what that color is. If you're looking in the infrared or the ultraviolet region, what you're measuring is not the color, but how, and this goes into a little bit more depth in the class, so it's not something that would be on the test, but so all molecules are held together by bonds, right? So carbon to carbon, carbon to oxygen, carbon to hydrogen, whatever, all of the elements that make together a molecule. The exact energy in those bonds, whether it's between phosphorus and oxygen, or carbon and hydrogen, or carbon and nitrogen, maybe it's a double bond, have a specific way that they're going to reflect light. And so the chemical bonds in a molecule are what shapes the curve that's reported by the spectrophotometer. Is it as precise and exact as, say, mass spectrometry? No. It's going to get more of, okay, we probably have a cyanide group or a carboxylic acid group, you know, large scale kinds of things. But again, because that's going to be an intrinsic physical property of anything we shine our spectrophotometer on, that pattern will be the same if we put two examples of the same thing under our spectrophotometer.
I see. And that was, I think, just one side note for that. If it's the the y-axis is a little bit different, that's okay, but the x-axis is the same.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. I think there was a question in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
That was actually the question I was going to ask too. Let me see. I slept on. Questioned.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me look at the reading here. Reading quiz. Question document.
I'm right. I don't think if it was not printed, I don't think it counts as a question document. I could be really wrong on that.
Yeah, so remember your definition of a document is it is a physical object with I haven't been is a physical object with handwritten or machine-made marks on it. So it has to meet both criteria to be considered a document. So for example, this Coke can could be considered a document.
I see. Okay, that is good to know.
But the stuff that's currently in the chat, not so much, because that does not exist in the physical world.
So if it's a printed email, that's when it becomes a question document.
If you can articulate the reason why that's true, that might be a good answer.
Let's see. So if it's because unprinted would mean it's on the World Wide Web. But if
In other words, I cannot tell you whether it is right or wrong, but I'm suggesting that you're on the right track.
Okay. I gotcha.
So that's not very fair, but it just does sound like that's solid logic.
Yeah, sorry. Let's go to look. Okay, I think that was the only question I had. I think everything else I was pretty confident. I got to look that one up too on my lecture, but I think that one should be, I know where to find that. All right. All right. Well, you have exhausted my notes, thankfully. So was there anybody else who had anything you could shout it out or just yell in the chat? I'd hate to be hogging the resources here. But
okay, for the people who are here, I will share something. Let's see here. That's not what I want to do. I don't want to connect to Google Drive. Oh, it only I cannot add a file from my computer. So I was going to share last year's exam review packet for the people here, since this is something that you're obviously interested in. But since I can't easily share it with y'all, I'll have to maybe I'll send it out early this year. I don't know. I want to give y'all as much chance as possible for success.
Oh, that would be awesome. I don't see if there's anything I could do on my end.
No, it's okay. It's the way Zoom works. They want you to use instead of them transferring the file between you, they want you to use a shared service like Dropbox or OneDrive or Google Drive or what have you.
I see. Yeah. I could. Yeah, I think that I would make you the host, but I think that.
No,
yeah.
it's more fair if I send it to the entire class instead. So I'll put that on a list of priority stuff to do this week.
Okay. Yeah, that would be really awesome to get started with that. And I guess one more just generic question. If you were taking this class, how would you study for it?
I would, since if you look at the questions that most people get wrong, they're the analysis questions, is that I would try to come up with, like, just look them up in the news or even famous ones. Like, currently we have like that unfortunate gentleman who was shot by the cop who thought she was pulling her taser. So it's what I asked myself, okay, what physical evidence would tell me that that person was shot? How could I tell how far away they've been shot from? Of course, that's going back to the biological stuff. What sort of digital information could confirm that he was speeding or he was running away from the cops? In the case of speeding, GPS triangulation, if you look at time, so we're fracking up the GPS satellites, would be, I realize we're in question document week, not digital forensics, that's next week. Things of that nature. If I had a document, such as my terrible sketch of my Viking house here, how could I confirm who wrote it or how? Do my very best to practice using the terminology and coming up with questions to ask myself that would force me to see, okay, and constantly going, why do I know this to be true? Why would my instrument tell me this thing? Like, not just how would I tell? Well, I could use a gas chromatograph. Well, why would the gas chromatograph be the right choice? Well, why do the molecules do that thing? And before you know it, you've turned into a college professor and you've gone down the rabbit hole 6 layers deep. But that's That would probably be what I would do.
I see. So just taking the information you learn here and incorporating it in everyday life. That makes a lot of sense.
Just let it take over your life because you're not taking any other classes or doing anything important.
Oh my goodness. If this were not interesting, I would die in this class. So I am so glad I am somehow interested in learning about dead bodies and stuff. But yeah, you have been more than helpful. I so appreciate you coming out and helping. And if we can do this again sometime,
We can
really?
certainly do it. We can certainly do it. If people would prefer a different time of day, as long as I'm not teaching, I'm generally of it. So I teach scheduled from 3 to 4:30. I don't actually teach that long, but I have a little prep before and after. So 3 to 4:30 Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Pretty much any other time of the day of the week, I can make it happen in some way. So if 1 o'clock on Wednesdays is bad for y'all, but another time would be better, I can work with you.
Yeah,
even if it's after 5, I'm okay with that. That's a good excuse for me to get up late. Oh no, I have a review session at 5. I get to sleep in until 10. Yay!
I was gonna say make a joke about like having that 2 a.m., but I mean,
You laugh. I replied to someone on Twitter at 3 o'clock in the morning once.
Oh my goodness. Then more study groups. Yeah. What was the study groups like before me? Was that just going over the week, like of the weekly session of what we would talk about that week? Yes. Yeah, I think that would be good because I was trying to go way back a little bit because I think a lot of that stuff I just didn't really understand the first time, and I'd hate for it to like slap me in the face twice. So, but I think that would be very good to go over the quiz stuff and everything of like the week we're doing it to stay on track.
That was the goal of these in the first place, but as I said, when I started to offer them at the beginning of the semester, not a single person showed up through the entirety of February. So it was not worth my time to be constantly on camera and not able to really leave the room or do anything else.
Yeah.
So, but yes, I'm happy to spend time just talking about what's going on this week in class. That's what I'm here for.
I think Chloe's right. I think we should probably do that.
One person or a dozen.
Yeah.
That's
we got a good group today. We got like 7 people right now.
We did.
Awesome. I'm gonna get to studying for my other exam, but I really appreciate you guys coming. So let's do this again sometime.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck on your Goosting exam.
Thank you so much.